service, there would be at least one song where we'd go to just drums and vocals, and this was always a really powerful moment, and then we would bring the music back in. And this was Greg's solo every week, so I knew it. Well, Greg had a seizure. He lost consciousness. We don't know what happened, but he passed out. Of course, in the culture that we were raised in, that was expected of you in church, to faint.
Okay.
So we weren't sure at the time if he was having an intense moment and a cathartic, mystical experience, or if he was sick. But I was the spotlight operator, and the youth pastor came up to me. He's like, "Hey, Darren, you can play drums, right?" Kind of. And I was like, "Yeah, yes, I can. Definitely." And so he's like, "Okay, well, come on up." So this was the end of the service. They'd already done all the music, and they were just going to do a couple songs to hype everybody up before we left. And so we did that song, and when it got to that part, I remember getting so excited because I knew how to play the beat. Then I got faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And it got so, comically double time that I just remember seeing the singer. She put her mic down and just she just turned away. She started laughing, and the song didn't really even end. We didn't go back to the next part. It was just like it was just me, and then I stopped, and it was just the whole room laughing at me, laughing at my exuberance, at my lack of time.
Sure.
I was so that my adrenaline was pumping so hard that I didn't realize what I had done. So I wasn't embarrassed at all. I was pumped. It was great, and that was my first time drumming in front of an audience of people.
When did it start to click? Like, when did you get to the point where you were just like, "Man, this is what I do, and I'm going to start doing this better"? And, when did it click too? Like, your timing right now is impeccable and has been ever since I've seen you. So it's like, when did all of those things come together for you?
It was probably when I started producing and writing along with playing drums that I learned how to listen to myself. When you start as a drummer, whenever you start recording yourself and listening back to the recordings is when you finally look in the mirror and can become a little bit objective, because especially in the early days of picking up a new instrument, when you're so excited to just emote on it, if you try to criticize at the same time, then you suck all the joy and life out of it. So I think it's good in the early days to not worry about being good, but just have fun with it. Yep. So I did that for years as a teenager. Drums it was just fun. It was just my safe, fun place. And I feel so lucky that I didn't have any overbearing presence in my life telling me that I was doing it wrong at that time.
Sure.
It wasn't until really after, or maybe, it was after high school that I started to try to challenge myself on the instrument.
Yeah, and then you grew into something that I think not a lot of people were really aware of. Like, so my first experience seeing you had basically what looked like a really crappy drum set with a bunch of crappy cymbals and hardware, but you played like, it was a snare drum, a floor tom, kick drum, hi-hat, and you had some sort of cymbal, and then, halfway into the second or third song, you start putting duct tape all over your head. And then, all bets were off at that point. I mean, everyone was just like, what is this? Like, we had no idea. No one had ever seen anything like that before. And this is before, Paul, I guess, got into it too. And he had stage presence and was walking on the crowd and, throwing around his guitar and all that stuff. But you really kind of started really shining then. I mean, I never saw your previous bands, but something clicked for you in that MUTEMATH group to where you just became, like I was telling you, on chat the other day, like the human drum machine. I mean, that's what I thought of you back then, and it was real. I mean, there was no need to, have a drum machine going along the same time, and you would mimic, what an 808 sounded like, or whatever it was, just like by having stuff on your. First time I'd ever seen anyone dampening their drum heads, like that blew my mind, because I wanted to be a drummer, and I was listening to the guys from Paul Meany and just all these really technical drummers that I really wanted to be like, and could never figure that out. But it started. You were incredible in those moments. But what started the whole was that necessity of taping your headset on? while you were drumming? I mean,
yeah. I wasn't the first drummer to do that. Keith Moon.
Oh, okay.
To tape
I should have known that.
his headphones on too whenever they would do that Teenage Wasteland song.
Yep.
Yeah, look at them playing live. He would tape them right around his forehead like that. And yeah, for me, it was just a way to practice and still move the way that I wanted to without losing my headphones.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point it became like shtick. There was a cool thing about taping the headphones on was that I could be not in the mood at all. There was something programmed in my brain that as soon as I did that, I was a different person. So
yeah, have you ever seen Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone where he turns his hat around? Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think it was so healthy just to have one of those things. So when I say shtick, I mean like it was a way for me to get into the character that I wanted to be in, and which was just a certain like bottled wildness.
Sure.
Love about drummers and drumming, and why drummers are the coolest people ever.
Yeah.
And why drummers are always cooler than everyone else is because they're crazy. All of them. They're all crazy. You can't want to do that. You don't want to be a drummer unless you've got some primitive, some latent leftover caveman or woman.
Sure.
Cave person in you.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think for me, the way I drummed on stage came about because of a few things. At the risk of getting too personal, like one was this deep desire just to be liked, and in church, drumming was the way that I got approval in a way that I never had before. I was socially awkward and had a strange insecurity that expressed itself in, like instead of being shy, I would try too hard, right? I'd go,
sure.
One of those kids, and drumming was a place where I could go all out, and people would, especially in a charismatic church like that, where people are, dancing and all that. It was welcomed. The wilder I got, and it was that was what I had so many experiences drumming, either in percussion, congas, or on the kit in church that were just super transcendent. Where I was transported, I got sent to another place while playing, and lost all track of time. And those are beautiful experiences. I think there's an intense to this part that's too personal, but I really think that this is an element. Like I was raised with this intense sexual repression vibes that we grew up in with, like True Love Waits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Full, we were supposed to be Ken dolls and have no acknowledgement of any design and no fulfillment of it until we magically met a person, married them.
Yeah.
Put the switch on,
Yeah.
And I think that trying to adhere to that strictly caused a whole lot of
Sure.
And the drums just became a
way to get that out. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
That's incredible.
That was my way of handling that, way of handling my desire. And then the other part of it was just fun as shit. It was just so fun to get to hit the drums and play, especially with a bass player like Roy, who's so locked in, and to play music that you had created.
Sure.
I've since then played for other artists, and I realized that no matter how fun it is to play someone else's song or how cool an experience is, there is nothing that compares to the journey of making music, then releasing it, and then performing it live with people that like it. That's a high that is hard to come down from, and it makes it easy for me to understand why there's so much substance abuse in music, so many unhealthy habits, and why there are so many pitfalls is because it's a pretty high to experience, and a hard one to to deal with.
Well, especially when you've got a crowd, man. I mean, like, you guys get the crowd. I mean, like, every show I've ever been that you've been a drummer for, whether it's at the conference or a MUTEMATH show, like, I mean, you get everyone into it. Like, it's almost like your biggest desire is for everyone to feel the same thing, right? And that's the thing I think that becomes magical, because not only are you drumming, but you're dancing, and the stuff you've been doing recently, at least with our community, has been getting out there and dancing with us, which I think is pretty amazing. But like that high you're expressing, I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, I don't even dance, and I start dancing when you're playing drums. It's ridiculous, and I look like an idiot too. There's video of it somewhere. But
no, you're great. You have beautiful moves.
But
I think that at some point I began approaching music as a service industry, similar to waiting tables, and that's all I ever did before doing music was I was a waiter, at Macaroni Grill and Ruth's Chris and other places like that.
That's awesome.
That's what I did, and I think that if you're a good performer on stage, then you're like a waiter, and you're serving, and it doesn't matter if you feel great. It doesn't matter if you're feeling it that particular day. People paid a lot of money, and then they paid an unnecessary service charge, and they got to sit it. So, show up.
Yeah, deliver.
And deliver and do it. And there I've had so many experiences playing shows where that feeling, that beautiful feeling, comes maybe halfway through the show, or maybe at the very end. Sometimes it comes and then it leaves. Sometimes that feeling of that force, that transcendent thing, will show up, and then it will disappear. At least for me, the thing that's so frustrating is that I've found that it's not consistent with what the audience really feels. There have been so many times where I would play a show and then feel like that was one, that was it. That I felt it the whole time. I thought we were locked in. It felt great. And someone that I trust, a friend, will come up and say, "Rough one."
Really?
Yeah, the thing like, it just wasn't very loud, or there's a room, it's something didn't feel right. Maybe they were tired.
Sure.
And then there will be other times where I would think, nothing was right. That was a rough one. And then someone will come up who's been to a lot of shows and they'll say,
that was the best one.
That was the one.
Yeah.
So I've learned that there's a big disconnect between my taste, and my job is just to show up and try to be a pro, be a conduit.
I think that's really amazing. I mean, one of the things we talk about at Creative Works, there's a guy out in Seattle named Jesse Bryan, and he got up in front of everyone and basically talked to a room full of creatives. A lot of them identify as artists, but then he kind of like shut it down and basically said, look, we're providing a service. Like, storytelling and design is a service industry. And so if you're not creating for the people that you've been hired to, you're just creating art and you're not helping them out. And anyway, it was a time of reset for so many of us, because I think so many artists and even designers kind of fancy themselves being too expressive, or just wanting to put themselves out there, their identity out there. We're operating, all of us, in some ways from some sense of insecurity, and then it's kind of odd what we do to make that up in the moment, right? And so this idea that you consider what you do as a service, that's pretty incredible. I think I've never heard that from a drummer, unless you're a gigging drummer, obviously. I mean, that's literally a thing that you get paid to do that. But you're saying this even when you're writing and producing music with MUTEMATH and stuff, which I think is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I think that maybe there's a hope that I can, at least for myself, elevate the value of the term entertainer, even over having to people call themselves artists, and that's fine. Sure. It's cool. It's okay to call yourself an artist or be an artist, but I think it's also okay to say that my primary goal is to entertain, be an entertainer. Sort of in the same way that drummers call their stool, I don't know if you know this, but drummers often call it drum throne.
Yeah.
That's a stool.
Sure.
That's not a throne. It's a stool, It's like an Indiana Jones.
Well, for you, man, there's a king sitting on the throne. I'm sure someone